History, modernity, secularism, religion, European, Asian. Istanbul is a complex city that is often hard to comprehend. My trip to Istanbul coincided with a fiercely contested national election that had electrified both the secular and religious sides of society. It was also Ataturk Day, a national holiday commemorating the founder of the modern secular state of Turkey. It seemed to me like both sides were fighting over which Turkey is the real Turkey, the Turkey of Ataturk and the secularists, or the Turkey of Ottoman history and what Erdogan and the AKP are trying to accomplish. To understand this divide, one must go back to the founding of Turkey itself. In 1922, the once mighty Ottoman Empire breathed its last breath. Its last great sultan, Sultan Abdul Hamid, was removed from power, and the empire was on the brink of disaster. After the First World War, the victorious powers of Europe sought to split up Ottoman lands between themselves and end the caliphate for good. Mustafa Kemal, a young, well-respected general in the army, bravely fought these Europeans to maintain as much land for his people as he could, and he was able to establish the modern state of Turkey along the country's current borders, earning the name Ataturk, or Father of Turkey. However, Ataturk soon began to fashion Turkish society in the image of Europeans themselves, believing it was the only way to achieve material success after the economically devastating war. Ataturk and his followers abolished the caliphate, shut down religious schools, changed the Turkish language to be written in Latin script, required the adhan to be recited in Turkish, and even banned religious clothing like fezes and hijabs. It's now been 100 years since Ataturk founded Turkey. In the last few decades, a conservative politician named Erdogan has made a name for himself, first as mayor of Istanbul, and then as leader of Turkey for the last 20 years. He's beloved by conservative Turkish citizens for his rollback of secular Turkish laws, earning the nickname Son of Abdul Hamid. Erdogan is running for his 5th term as Turkey's leader, and his secular rivals have come together to defeat him once and for all. I prayed my first Jummah in the Fatih district on the European side of Istanbul. Fatih is famous for being the city's center of Islamic knowledge. The district is named after Muhammad al-Fatih, the young Ottoman Sultan who first conquered this heavily fortified city back in 1453. His grave lies next door to the magnificent mosque that bears his name.
I mean, obviously they don't have pure records, but he was like somewhere between the ages of 18 to 21. Yeah, like most people who are 18 or 21 are like buying fake likes for Instagram to get their name out there.
Joining me is Nihal Khan, who served as an Imam in the United States for several years before going on a knowledge-seeking journey throughout the Muslim world. After studying under Hanafi scholars in Lucknow, India, he was attracted to Istanbul, another iconic setting of the Hanafi tradition.
And up here is a hadith actually of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, لَتُفْتَحُنَّ الْقُسْطَنْطِنِيَّةَ, that indeed Constantinople will be conquered. فَلَنِعْمُ الْأَمِيرُ أَمِيرُهَا, and how amazing of a leader will it have, وَلَنِعْمَ الْجَيْشُ ذَلِكَ الْجَيْشُ, and how amazing of an army will that army be. So when I got here, I enrolled at a ma'had, which is basically a program for Islamic studies, like a very intense program for Islamic studies. And to kind of premise this, I completed a Alamiya degree from Nadwatul Ulama in Lucknow. And then I was an Imam for several years in America, and I've been teaching Arabic for the last like 12 years. I got to this program, I'm like, yep, I don't know anything.
Wow.
Yeah. Ilm al-Kalam, and then Hadith, and Tafsir, and Arabic. Like, they just wanted to make sure that we as students knew our stuff really well. And I think I'm happy I spent the time that I did there, because we were like memorizing texts and all that stuff. So it was an amazing experience, and it informed me more so what I didn't know, and also informed me of that which I needed to know. And then I went on to learn that which I needed to know.
When you first moved here, you lived in Fatih.
Yep.
Do you still live in Fatih?
Nope. We live towards Ayyub.
Ayyub Sultan?
Yeah, we're like 5 minutes from it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, did you like living in Fatih, or was it hard?
Fatih was nice, but also Fatih was a little crazy.
Yeah.
I wanted to practice my Turkish,
Yeah.
and really couldn't do that here. Number one, because I was in the Mahad and just have a lot on your plate, focusing on Islamic studies and
Yeah.
Arabic. So we moved 6 months in, and that's when I also switched programs. So then I enrolled into the PhD in Islamic studies at Ibn Khaldun University.
Yeah.
I haven't started it yet, but because they have a year requirement to learn Turkish, so I'm like in the last month and a half of learning Turkish.
Oh, okay.
Still not completely fluent, but I can order a kebab. So
So you were saying that anyone can just come to the Mahad and study?
well, they'll interview you, and then
They'll interview you.
yeah, they'll interview you. It's it's a process. They just want full commitment.
Okay.
Yeah,
And once you come here, you don't have to pay out of your own pocket?
not for the mahads, no.
Wow.
But again, it's run by a lot of Syrian ulama who
Okay.
are working with Turkish waqfs, and a lot of times those waqfs are, they're not heavily funded, and in a lot of places, it's still tough for the scholars that live out here. Some of them have to work multiple jobs and
Oh, wow.
hustle to
Yeah.
make it. A lot of times the mahad, they're just like even our mahad, it was inside of an apartment building.
Oh, wow.
There's a lot of local Turks as well. Right now we're heading towards the Charshamba neighborhood, which was home of Sheikh Mahmoud Effendi, rahimahullah, who was the Sheikh of the current president of Turkey, and as well as the head of a major tariqah in Turkey, which had safeguarded the religion during times where the public display and practice of religion had become banned, so much so that the adhan was recited in Turkish. The interesting thing about this area, so you see the minarets up here, they actually don't give the adhan here, neither just from the inside nor on microphone, but they actually go up into the minaret here and then at the Ismail Aga Masjid over here.
So they do it the traditional way.
Yes, sir. Called Shifa Shorba because they actually read salawat upon it for like 24 hours and they're cooking it.
Wow.
And as you can tell, the place is run by some of the murids of Mahmoud Effendi, rahimahullah.
So like while it's stirring, they have a huge pot and they're constantly
Basically,
reciting.
yeah. Right here it comes. Sağ olun, teşekkürler.
It's quite nice.
Like when we used to have like if me and my wife weren't feeling well,
Yeah.
this is the stuff we'd have.
Wow.
Because it's like around the corner, and sometimes they deliver, or they do deliver as well.
Wow.
Fatih is crowded, but you get good food.
With a very good complex flavor. Like you can really tell it's been cooking for a long time, not just like a quick lentils.
Which is different than any of the other lentil soups you'll have in Turkey.
Yeah. So maybe it's the du'as that's the special ingredient. What tips do you have for Muslims in the West who are looking to do the hijrah to a Muslim country?
Some people, for them, they feel they can't raise their kids in America. They feel that for whatever reason, either financial or social or even religious maybe, they feel that America is not meeting their needs for that. And that's okay to go elsewhere and do that. And actually, like a lot of folks tend to raise their kids in other places. But that said, I think hijrah is a very grand idea, but at the same time, whatever you're doing, just know the intention for it. Right? Actions are by intention. You may not have to move out of the country to do that. You could move to a different city in a different place and find the same objectives. And also keep in mind, Turkey is not a Muslim country. Turkey is a secular country with a Muslim majority. So knowing that, right, you're still going to find people like wanting to be Hollywood stars. You're still going to find people selling alcohol. You're still going to find people talking about not believing in God. And it could be a safe haven for you, but if you have like children and your kids recognize that your parents are born and raised in America, they may want to still identify with that culture. So you got to navigate those things before you just decide to Before you come to the conclusion that getting up and leaving a place is where all your problems will go away.
It's a must to learn the language.
Oh, absolutely. There are folks that I know that live here 3-4 years, haven't learned the language. I find that disrespectful. I'm sorry. For example, like we were talking about how do you enter a masjid, right? In Turkey. Like you need to learn these things. Like we have a whole corpus dedicated to learning our urf and usul al-fiqh, right? Like how does culture take a legal precedent within legal rulings in Islamic law? But yeah, don't just come to a place and like reverse colonize it. That's what I like to say, right? Like I like to say it's a form of like reverse colonization. You come, you bring your language, your culture, your baggage, and then enforce it on the place you're living in. Like don't do that.
Nihal first settled in Fatih to study with senior Syrian scholars, many of whom were refugees from their hometowns, and now open ma'heds or institutes in Istanbul. The Ismail Aga neighborhood is a particularly fascinating place, where a deep Turkish Sufi tradition has avoided erasure by Ataturk's reforms. We took a short bus ride to Ayyub Sultan, the neighborhood bordering Fatih to the north.
Say hi to the camera. The area is named after Abu Ayyub al-Ansari radiyallahu anh. And the thing that makes it famous is that when the hadith about Constantinople being conquered was said by the Prophet ﷺ, Abu Ayyub, and for those of you that don't know, he was the companion that first hosted the Messenger ﷺ in his home when he first came to Medina, right? So he was of the Ansar. And when the hadith came up about Constantinople being conquered, Abu Ayyub actually made his way here, and he died. This area right now is outside of the walls of Constantinople. So there's two areas demarcated inside of the masjid in which they think Abu Ayyub is buried in. The fact that he's buried here brings so many people here just out of a place of barakah and wanting to learn about Abu Ayyub al-Ansari radiallahu anhu. So
It's like a connection to the Prophet. So
exactly. You live in a land in which you know where many pious people are buried. You live in a land where even if somebody may not be practicing Islam, it's in the air.
Yeah.
You know, it's in the air at the end of the day.
Imam Nihal's stay in Istanbul was always temporary, as he had come for the specific reason of studying Islam. However, many Muslims from the West have moved to this caliphal capital with the intention of staying long term. One such Muslim is Abu Ayyub, a Latino convert to Islam, who grew up in North America and made the move to Istanbul with his family 6 years ago. As an Islamic history aficionado, he's found a home here in this legendary city. I took the ferry over the Bosphorus to Uskudar, a trendy neighborhood on the Asian side of Istanbul, to meet with Abu Ayyub.
What's the most unique thing about Turkey compared to all other places you've lived in?
Turkey has this very long, deep spiritual tradition that you don't find in a lot of other places. Yes, you know, we were in Muslim countries, but when it came to a spiritual tradition, that was oftentimes lacking, especially, you know, in the Gulf countries. You know, life was good, alhamdulillah, and things were easy there. It was a very safe place. However, at some point in time, I felt this absence, you know, this real like absence spiritually, and it was something that my heart was longing for. And then at the same time, coming from the West and going eastwards, Turkey really is that bridge, you know, between East and West. And that's something I think a lot of people feel. That's why when they come here, they feel that comfort.
Istanbul is a very split city. You have areas that are very secular. Like you were telling me, you can still have a hijab ripped off in public. And then there's areas that are very, very spiritual. Do you feel like you have to stick within certain areas of the city? Or do you feel like comfortable wherever you are?
Many Westerners are sort of under this impression that, you know, Turkey is this Muslim country. They've watched, you know, all 500 episodes of Ertugrul, and so they think that, you know, everything's about wallah and, you know, go and pray and make dua. It's not like that here. I know people who have come, who have visited Istanbul, and these are Muslims. These are other Muslims who have come here, and their reaction or their experience in Istanbul is that they hated it. right? So these are people who, when they came, they went to areas that are very secular, that they found, very few masajid, they found bars and nightclubs and things like that. And their experience wasn't something special. Initially, when I came here, it was interesting, it was nice, but I came here as a tourist and I didn't really find something that sort of struck me, not until I entered one neighborhood in particular, and that's the Ismail Aga neighborhood. And in that neighborhood, everything kind of changed. And it's funny to say this, but it reminds me, and I'm sure anyone who's been to New York or knows the Orthodox Jewish community there, it reminds me of Williamsburg. But it's all Muslims there. And when I found that neighborhood, I thought to myself, subhanAllah, this must have been what it was like, 100, 200 years ago. Because all you see are people with turbans, men with turbans, long beards, jubbas, and, walking around, students of knowledge, the men, the women, the children, everyone looked ilmi. And so all of a sudden, when I found that, I knew I found a home here. But yes, you're absolutely right, because there are certain places where I'll go and certain places that I won't step foot, So I frequent, a lot of the very spiritual sites, places like Ayyub Sultan. I'll go to Fatih. Fatih is, in the sort of the scholarly center of the city. I'll go to Uskudar, where it's considered semi-conservative. You still have history and at the same time, beautiful walks along the water and things like that. So I'll go to those places, and rarely will you find me in some of the other areas. Places like Taksim, I rarely go there. Beşiktaş, although they have good restaurants there, I won't go there too often. Another place like Kadıköy.
Tell me a little bit about, how a lot of Muslims in the West, we have ancestry to a Muslim country. And so we can always go visit that country and feel the connection to the Muslim world. But as a convert yourself, it's a little harder to find that. And so maybe a place like Istanbul, with its rich history, its capital of the caliphate, a place that has people from all over the world, it feels like it could be a place for everyone.
As someone who embraced Islam, I've had to build my own history. And that was not always an easy process. But at the same time, when you're immersed in the history and you realize that this is also your history, that's when you start feeling, this real development of pride. In a city like this, we are connected to a purpose, because the reason why the Muslims even came here to begin with begins with the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. Without that hadith, would we have been so eager to come here? I don't know. I don't think so. We're an extension of that hadith. That's why being here is more than just being in any Muslim city. And so for me, I also look at it as part of the inheritance, the wiratha of every Muslim. Doesn't matter what your background is, doesn't matter where you're from. This masjid, its name is Yeni Valide. And that means the new, mother of the Sultan's mosque. And she had this masjid commissioned. It's one of the older ones that you find in Uskudar.
In Turkey, it's like every masjid forces you to look up. They're so large, the minarets are so tall and so ornate, it's so beautiful.
You can see the details that have been placed in these masjids. This awareness of doing things with ihsan, to doing things with perfection, with beauty. That's everywhere in the masajid here in Turkey. And there's so much history, so much life in these walls and under these domes, or in between these pillars. Don't take these things for granted. Always realize that this is a gift from Allah Azza wa Jal. And I try to come to these places as if it's my first time. Even though, this is like, for example, I pray Jummah here, on a regular basis, but I come to these places like it's my first time, and that's how it also keeps that sacredness in one's heart as well.
My first experiences in Istanbul were influenced by the heavy political climate, but after a few days, I started to explore the city as a tourist. Every year, nearly 16 million tourists from Arabia, Europe, Asia, and the Americas descend upon this centrally located metropolis. Hubs like Fatih District and Taksim Square see tons of foot traffic every day. In recent years, Muslim tourists from the West have especially come here in droves, seeking to experience the last vestige of a powerful Muslim empire, while enjoying the Western luxuries often missing from other Muslim countries. I spent some time exploring these historical sites, starting off with the Hagia Sophia, a former Greek Orthodox church of the Byzantine Empire that was transformed into a masjid in 1453 upon the conquest of Constantinople. It served as a mosque until 1935, when Ataturk turned it into a museum. However, in 2020, Erdogan reversed it back to a mosque while still keeping it open for tourists. To be honest, it was a bit chaotic to pray in, but this change was a huge win for Erdogan supporters. Across from the Hagia Sophia is the Sultan Ahmet Mosque, also known as the Blue Mosque. Magnificent mosques like these dot the skyline of this stunning city, their silhouettes defining the horizon at sunset. You can spend an entire day or even a week exploring the beautiful mosques of Istanbul. They reflect the grandeur of a lost era, one where Islam reigned supreme in this region of the world, and Muslim empires were at the peak of global civilization. I grabbed dinner at the Old Ottoman Cafe, a restaurant preserving the feel of an era bygone. I went with the traditional Ottoman fish stew, a delicious soft fillet of fish in a savory tomato gravy topped with fresh melted sheep's cheese. During my trip, I was determined to go for as long as possible without giving in to the ubiquitous kebab. When I told my Western friends about this strategy, they thought I was insane, but I knew that if I settled for kebab gorging like most tourists, I would miss out on Turkey's varied cuisine.
This is my 5th day here and I haven't had kebab yet.
Oh, really? Okay.
What are you eating? Salad?
And I think I made the right choice. Cheesy sausage pide, yogurty, vinegary tripe soup, grilled liver on lavash bread, lahmacun, Hassan Pasha kufte, a type of meatball topped with mashed potatoes, and so much more. But the star of the show were these fresh mussels, sold on the street by men who shuck them as you order and stuff them with a delightful blend of rice, herbs, and lemon juice. However, by the 5th day, I finally gave in to kebab at a popular restaurant on the Asian side of Istanbul.
Back from Colombia. This is when I was like, this is too much.
Oh, you were with the Chris, right? Yeah, the whole gang.
How was it?
It's good.
I just stopped everything I was saying. I want to make sure.
Okay, I had to admit, it was delicious, succulent, and my mouth waters still thinking about it. But it was arguably upstaged by this delicious fresh ayran, which put all the salty store-bottled stuff to shame. But I learned that Istanbul's cuisine isn't just kebab after all. There are so many influences that coalesce in the city's dynamic food scene, and it's foolish to limit yourself to just ground meat on a stick. As a city that straddles Europe and Asia, Istanbul is a unique hub for the exchange of ideas. Informed by the fashion centers of Europe, like Milan and Paris, and the traditional Islamic world, Istanbul has emerged as a center for the fast-growing Muslim fashion industry. I was invited to tour the headquarters of Modanisa, a giant in the modest fashion industry, and briefly meet Chairman Karim Toure himself.
My name is Kerim Toure.
I'm the founder of Modanisa.com. I never think of being in the fashion business. To be honest with you, when I was a kid, I was thinking about technology. Yes, broadcasting was one of my dreams. That's why I went to Boston and did my master's on broadcasting and communications. Then, knowing myself a little better, I started to look for opportunities. My friends, my mom, and the others, everyone was talking about the scarcity of the modest fashion options. I said, it's weird because it's a 99% Muslim country we're living in. Yeah. But the fashion producers were looking towards the Western fashion. And no one was dealing with the fashion needs of the modest women. And that's why there were only 4 or 5 players in that area, and there were thousands of players on the other areas, the other Western fashion areas. I tried to convince those guys, the producers, to produce for the modest fashion needs. I was trying to explain them what they need to do, and I was trying to put them together in a platform. I was telling them, be together and form a platform, and I can also help you, with a small percentage I can be in, and you can do those because you have the fashion knowledge, and I'll help you with the technology because I have other people. I can give you the tools to do that. All of them that when I talked, they said, our people don't buy from internet. Okay? That was a challenge for me that time. I said, your people will buy from internet, not only from Turkey, but from the overseas also. Because if it is a need in Turkey, imagine in Texas, a Muslim lady, where can they find their dresses? At first, we were trying to convince people to sell at Modanisa. After 1.5 years, people were coming to Modanisa with their collections in their hand to sell it at Modanisa. And the first days, there was only 19 models I could find with a long sleeve during the summertime. Wow. Right now, when you go to Modanisa, you can see more than 4,000 long sleeve tunics only. And right now, Modanisa is selling to 130 countries worldwide. Wow. We are one of the biggest e-exporter of Turkey, and proud to say that we have more than 5 million customers all around the world, and we believe from the first day on, people doesn't need to sacrifice their values to look good.
The results of the election were in. Erdogan was victorious once again, cementing his leadership for another 5 years and into his 3rd decade in power. I heard from 2 voters on why they support and don't support Erdogan's leadership. Yakub Kiyank is an interesting case. Ethnically Kurdish, he doesn't call himself a Turkish person, but rather a citizen of Turkey. His people have faced oppression at the hands of both secular Turkish nationalists and Erdogan's AKP. Yet he has decided that for him, Erdogan is the lesser of 2 evils.
Power is in the hand of the Muslims for now. The people now they all back Erdogan. All people who oppressed in the past, they all see him like a savior. People who oppressed during the secular period, as a Kurdish, also Erdogan was also good guys for Kurdish. And in the first 10 or 12 years, he was also good, but until the Kurdish parts get support and get more votes, he feels, he changed his politics, and he has some alliance with the racist. But although he has these all things, I also feel like, okay, he is better than him. Really, that's why Erdogan wins election. Normally, according this, economic crisis, this is the problem in the world, the corona, these all things. Normally, Erdogan should lose the election, but the lifestyle, because of my religion, because of my wife, because of my wife's headscarf. I remember the 90s, these all soldiers suppressed our women. They don't let my wife to go to university because of his headscarves. Most of people, maybe 90% of the people who votes for AKP is votes for Erdogan, not for AKP. Just directly his personality. For example, my mom, she doesn't know anything about the political party, nothing, but he says he is Muslim. He says Allah, he says Inshallah, he says like that. It's enough for her. And I think that maybe 20 or 30% of Turkey is vote just for sticks. That's why people like him.
Yeah.
He says he's always support Muslims.
Yeah.
In Palestine, in Iraq, in Syria, and also these refugees. It's all secular and all people who are against Erdogan now criticize and attack Erdogan because of this flow of the refugees. It's almost 7 or 8 million people in Turkey. Turkey hosts almost 8 million people. It's so high.
One of the issues Yaqub has been paying attention to during this election cycle is the Syrian refugee crisis. Since the start of the Syrian revolution in 2011, millions of refugees were forced to flee to nearby countries, with Turkey being the largest host country of them all. Today, an estimated 4 million Syrian refugees live in Turkey, which locals believe are conservative estimates. The state of refugees in Turkey is dire. From former scholars and doctors to students and children, Syrians have lost everything and have had to restart from scratch. And yet, anti-refugee sentiment has exploded during this election cycle. Erdogan's political rivals promised to send refugees home and blamed him for allowing so many of them to enter their country. And while Erdogan has promised not to expel the refugees to a war-torn land, he has also continued to engage in the war itself, maintaining a military presence in northern Syria. Though Yaqub isn't a big fan of Erdogan, preserving his family's religious rights and allowing Syrian refugees to stay has earned Erdogan his vote.
We won't force them to send back. He always says, and that's why some Muslim again vote for him. For example, me, I will vote for him again just for this reason.
On the other side of the aisle, Zishan is a young Muslim Istanbulite who isn't happy with the rule of Erdogan and the AKP party. She's currently studying for her PhD in urban planning, and she's critical of the AKP's policies that have changed the landscape of her hometown, quite literally.
If you actually look at like a satellite image or like a satellite time lapse, for instance, then you can literally see the city landscape changing very fast. The land use changing, the green areas diminishing, and residential areas just spreading to the peripheries of the city. We are seeing more tall buildings, a lot of construction, never-ending construction, a lot of renovations.
A lot of people are struggling financially. There's a lot of inflation happening. Unemployment is on the rise. What are some of the issues leading to that?
Basically, Turkish currency has been going through a process of devaluation for the last couple of years. Very high rates of inflation, historically high rates of inflation. And basically, the reason is the economic policies. So Turkey is a growing economy, and growing economies are expected to have high interest rates. However, as an economic policy, interest rates were kept low in Turkey, which eventually caused the economic crisis that we experience today. Part of it is about the urban transformation of Istanbul as well. A major part of Turkey's economic growth relies on the construction sector. In 2012, there was this law called the Urban Transformation Act, different neighborhoods in the city to be radically transformed. There is a lack of community participation, democratic participation. The urban growth in Istanbul basically caused a lot of natural areas, natural preserves, waterways, and forests to be harmed. If the focus is growth, it is pretty easy to think of environmental considerations as a side thought.
So one of the issues with the earthquake that happened recently was a lot of the buildings weren't up to code. And that was kind of the fault of the government because they didn't force regulations to be followed. Is that correct?
So the law that allows the urban transformation in Turkey and specifically in Istanbul today is called the Urban Transformation Act for the areas under the risk of disaster. And this law was passed to transform the areas that are prone to disaster risk, whose buildings are not up to code. However, if you compare the distribution of the disaster-prone areas versus where the urban transformation is going on in Istanbul right now, it's a complete mismatch. Hundreds and thousands of buildings in Istanbul were rebuilt. I think it's a mischance. And Istanbul has a lot to do to make it an earthquake resilient city.
What does Istanbul need to do to be on the world stage on cities like New York, London, Singapore?
So for the record, I love New York, but so there is this Turkish author, Nobel-winning author named Orhan Pamuk, and he says that Istanbul is the capital of the world, and I genuinely believe that. I don't think Istanbul should necessarily try to be attractive to foreigners, change itself in a way that makes it attractive to foreigners. On the contrary, it's actually harming Istanbul in a way. I think to be a world-class city, you first need to serve your residents, serve the locals the best way possible. The residents need to be a part of the planning processes. They need to know what's going on, what's changing in their neighborhoods, and they need to be able to actually influence the decisions that are made for them top down. I think it will become much closer to being a world city once it can accommodate its residents to its best. Then it will be easier for it to open to the rest of the world, I think.
On first glance, Istanbul seemed to me like a city ravaged by culture wars that rivaled what we have in the US. But when I spent some time here, met with locals, and explored different neighborhoods, I got a different story. Istanbul's world centricity, its imperial history, and its reputation as a center for commerce all contribute to the wide variety of people and experiences that you will find here. This beautiful city never lets you get bored. Its vast history isn't relegated to books, and its people are deeply proud of their heritage. What the future holds is uncertain, but what I'm sure of is that the citizens of Turkey will have a say in it.